Magnesium is an essential dietary mineral where, unlike all the other vitamins and stuff that I talked about before, it doesn't really have a structure because it is just a single magnesium atom or a single magnesium ion. I suppose the only structure I could possibly explain is that because magnesium is in group 2 of the periodic table, it can lose 2 valence electrons to obtain a completely stable outer shell, and this ion is therefore a magnesium 2+, and because your body is 70% water, and these magnesium minerals and stuff, they often come from salt and ionic compounds that are inside of the foods that you eat. When you eat it, these salts, they often dissolve inside of the water that is basically the solvent inside of the body. And so magnesium, when it's going around in the body, is going to take the form of the 2+ ion. Now, magnesium deficiency can often be characterized by things like fatigue and vomiting and nausea and just general lethargy. And the foods that magnesium is most commonly found in are green leafy vegetables. And the reason that is because these green leafy vegetables, they contain a green pigmented compound known as chlorophyll. And this chlorophyll is able to absorb light from the sun and convert it into energy, which is essentially photosynthesis. That is the way that plants produce their food and their energy. But magnesium is the central part of this chlorophyll system. If you imagine like hemoglobin making blood red with the sort of iron ligand inside of the molecule, that is essentially what this chlorophyll is, but instead of it being iron, it's just magnesium. Obviously, the structure of the actual outer thing is different compared to heme and compared to the whole chlorophyll thing, but it's a similar sort of idea, I suppose, with this central metal ion and all that sort of stuff. Now, even though these green leafy vegetables, in terms of macronutrients, are some of the least calorific things on the planet, energy can't really exist without magnesium being present inside of the body. Hence why its deficiency symptoms are fatigue and lethargy. That's its main sort of thing, because magnesium's main function as a mineral is to produce energy and allow energy production enzymatic reactions to occur inside of the body. ATP is the universal energy currency, and magnesium forms a complex with ATP to stabilize it when it's inside of these enzyme active sites and just generally just going around the body, because it is quite an unstable molecule. The triphosphate group, the third phosphate, is very, very high energy, and so it needs to be stabilized, and that is what magnesium is for. And if you look at the structure of an ATP or an ADP molecule, you'll notice that they have a lot of O- on them, because phosphate is a derivative of phosphoric acid. Now, when this phosphoric acid is inside of solution, often the hydrogens will dissociate from the 3 oxygens to form PO4 3- as a ion, essentially, and then you're going to have 3 H+, which makes the solution acidic. And this ATP contains 3 phosphate groups in a row, and in total it has 4 O-. Now, the 2 that need to be stabilized are now, glycolysis, which is the metabolism and digestion of carbohydrates and sugars, is probably one of the main processes where ATP and ADP are directly involved. You're going to start with glucose, and that's going to have some phosphate added onto it, and that's going to require ATP turning into ADP, and that's going to require magnesium. And then once you're going to then have 2 glyceraldehyde, 3 phosphate molecules. That's then going to have a phosphate group attached onto each, and that doesn't require magnesium. And then these phosphate groups are individually taken off to produce ATP, which is energy. And those reactions which take the phosphate groups off require magnesium as a cofactor for ATP to stabilize it. An example of a mechanism of a reaction where this magnesium ADP-ATP complex is used is in the enzyme pyruvate kinase, which turns phosphoenol pyruvate into pyruvate. And phosphoenol pyruvate has a phosphate group on it, and an ADP molecule, which is attached or sort of ionically binded to a magnesium ion. ADP only has 3 O-, and so 2 of these O-, the sort of 2 on the bottom, if you like, going to be offset by the Mg2+ ion, so that sort of offsets 2 of the O-, and then you've got 1 O- left. That O- is going to attack the phosphate on the phosphoenol pyruvate molecule, and then the bond between the phosphoenol pyruvate molecule and the phosphate, that's going to break, and both the electrons are going to go to the oxygen, and that will make it O-, and then you're going to have ATP. And the reason that you were able to get ATP is because the magnesium stabilized the ADP molecule, offset 2 of the O- charges. So there was only 1 O- which could attack the delta positive phosphate on the phosphoionopyruvate molecule. The reason that the phosphate is delta positive and the O- is able to attack it, in a sense, is that the phosphate is bonded to 4 whole oxygens, which are incredibly electronegative and pull the electrons in the bonds closer to itself, and that means that phosphorus's electrons, when it would be a neutral atom, are pulled further away from it, and so all the protons inside of the nucleus, it's going to sort of make it more positive, and the lone pair on the O is going to sort of realize this, I suppose, and attack it, and then that's going to cause all the processes that we talked about. And as I mentioned earlier, if there's less magnesium, less ATP, total net ATP can be produced inside of the body at any one time, and that's going to cause lethargy and fatigue. And you're also not as well going to be able to produce ATP, but producing ATP isn't actually the energetic part of the reason that ATP actually produces energy. When ATP turns into ADP and the bond between the second and third phosphates breaks, that is the energy releasing process. That is what actually releases energy in the first place, which I found very interesting. ATP isn't the high energy thing, it's actually the conversion of ATP to ADP that is what really matters. And if ATP can't be stabilized enough to like react with a molecule and turn that into a phosphate thing, and then ADP is also released, if there is no magnesium to stabilize that reaction, if that enzyme requires magnesium to stabilize the ATP, obviously that isn't going to be the case with every single ATP reaction on the planet, because there's going to be a huge amount of them that probably is way more than 300 enzymatic reactions possible. But in the cases where it is needed, if there is no magnesium to stabilize it, then you can't have that energy conversion from ATP to ADP when the bond breaks, because there's no magnesium. Another useful benefit to magnesium, which is completely unrelated to anything to do with ATP and anything to do with energy production, is that it is useful and utilized in a lot of testosterone producing enzymes as well. And this will be a completely different mechanism to the whole ATP situation that we talked about, but I'm assuming that it's still going to have the same kind of principle where it is stabilizing, or it is used to offset some delta negativity or some O- charge or something like that. That's what it's going to be used for most likely, but I'm not entirely sure, and I probably could have done more research on that, but it's whatever. And magnesium deficiency is going to be another reason why you feel quite lethargic and tired. Testosterone is a useful hormone when it comes to drive and motivation, and if you have no drive and motivation because you have lower testosterone because your magnesium is low, that's going to also cause this sort of lethargic feeling. But with that, I recommend subscribing for more content like this, and have a good day.